The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in warm hues of orange and pink. The apparent tranquility of the Virgen del Rocío hospital contrasted sharply with the intense activity within. In the corridors, the rhythmic sound of hurried footsteps from doctors and nurses echoed, creating a symphony of dedication and urgency. Among them stood Dr. Nathaniel Walker, a renowned surgeon known not only for his surgical skill, but also for his unwavering humanity. Nathaniel, in his impeccable white coat and an expression of deep concentration, walked briskly towards the emergency room. He was a man of solid principles, someone who saw in each patient a valuable life, worthy of all his efforts. His colleagues respected him, not only for his technical expertise, but also for his ability to make difficult decisions with astonishing calm. One afternoon, as Nathaniel was finishing a complicated surgery, the desperate cries of a woman shattered the hospital routine. "Help, please. My son is very ill." The mother's voice, filled with anguish, resonated in the waiting room. Holding her child in her arms, her face reflected the fear and despair of a mother who saw her son caught between life and death. Nathaniel stepped out into the hallway and came face to face with the scene. The child, pale and weak, could barely keep his eyes open. The mother, with tears streaming down her cheeks, pleaded with the receptionist, who explained in a cold tone that without medical insurance, they could not treat the child. "I'm sorry, Mom, but we don't offer free care at this hospital." Nathaniel's heart sank. The hospital's strict policy allowed no exceptions, but he knew he couldn't ignore the mother's plea. He approached them and asked in a firm but calm voice, "What seems to be the problem here?" "Doctor, she doesn't have insurance. We can't treat her here," replied the receptionist, visibly uncomfortable but adhering to hospital rules. Nathaniel looked at the receptionist, then at the mother and the child in her arms. Without hesitation, he made a decision that he knew could cost him dearly. "Take him to the emergency room. Tell them I authorized his admission," he ordered. As he walked toward the emergency room carrying the child, Nathaniel ignored the disapproving glances from some colleagues. He knew his actions would have consequences, but he couldn't let a child die at the hospital doorsteps. Entering the emergency room, he placed the child on a gurney and began giving quick and precise orders to the nursing team. "I need an IV line now," he said, examining the young patient. The team mobilized quickly, efficiently following his instructions. Suddenly, the door to the room flew open, and Edward, the hospital director, entered, his face tense and his brow furrowed. "Nathaniel, what do you think you're doing? You know we're not allowed to treat uninsured patients here," he said, trying to keep his voice low so as not to alarm anyone. Nathaniel, focused on stabilizing the child, replied without looking up. "I can't let a child die at our doorstep, Edward. Not while there's something I can do to help." Edward came closer, lowering his voice even more. "You're risking your position here, Nathaniel. If this boy doesn't survive, the responsibility will be yours, and the consequences too." Nathaniel, finishing the initial procedure, looked up and faced Edward. "And so be it. I'd rather face the consequences than live with the guilt of doing nothing." The tension in the room was palpable. The medical team silently observed the confrontation between two men with different ideals. With every passing second, the child showed signs of improvement under Nathaniel's meticulous care. The monitors reflected gradual stabilization, and a glimmer of hope pierced the tense atmosphere. When the child's condition finally stabilized, Nathaniel allowed himself to breathe. He knew he had done the right thing, even if repercussions were inevitable. The child's mother, with tears of gratitude, approached him and said, "Dr. Walker, I have no words to thank you. You saved my son's life when no one else was willing to help." Nathaniel smiled wearily and replied, "It's my duty, ma'am. The health and life of every patient are paramount." The calmness at the Virgen del Rocío hospital seemed to have been restored after the intense episode with the child Nathaniel Walker had saved. However, disapproving looks and whispers still lingered in the hallways. The news of his action had spread rapidly, and although many considered him a hero, others saw him as a transgressor of the rules. Nathaniel stood firm in his decision, convinced he had done the right thing. The health and life of each patient were his priority, regardless of hospital policies. But uncertainty about his future at the hospital weighed heavily on him. Edward, the hospital director, had called a meeting with the board of directors to discuss the consequences of his act of defiance. Upon arriving home that night, Nathaniel found Claire, his wife, waiting in the living room. Her eyes reflected concern and fatigue. She knew the situation was difficult for both of them. "Nathaniel," Claire said softly, "what's going to happen now? Are they going to fire you?" He sighed, dropping his jacket on the sofa. "I don't know, Claire. They haven't made a decision yet. But I did what I thought was right." Claire looked at him with eyes full of love and worry. "I know, and I'm proud of you for that. But I'm also worried about what might happen." Nathaniel nodded, understanding her fears. "Everything will be fine," he tried to reassure her, although he himself wasn't so sure. "Right now, we just need to wait." The night passed in a tense calm. Claire retired to bed early, while Nathaniel remained in the living room, mentally going over the day's events. The image of the child recovering under his care gave him some comfort, but the shadow of uncertainty about his career continued to haunt him. Shortly after midnight, the silence of the house was broken by the insistent ringing of the telephone. Nathaniel quickly got up and answered. "Dr. Walker, sorry for the late hour," said a familiar voice on the other end of the line. It was Anna, one of the hospital nurses. "Mayor Lewis has suffered a heart attack. We need you to come immediately." Nathaniel felt a knot in his stomach. "I'm on my way," he replied without hesitation. He hung up the phone and quickly got dressed. Claire, awakened by the noise, appeared in the doorway of the bedroom. "What's wrong?" "Mayor Lewis is in critical condition. I have to go to the hospital," Nathaniel explained as he put on his jacket. "Be careful," Claire said, her voice filled with concern. Nathaniel nodded and hurried out of the house. He drove at full speed towards the hospital, his thoughts focused on the patient who needed his help. But the rush and tension of the moment worked against him. Turning a corner at high speed, he didn't see the car approaching in the opposite direction. The impact was inevitable. The sound of twisting metal and shattering glass filled the air. Nathaniel felt the blow and the jolt as his car came to an abrupt stop. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Shaken but conscious, Nathaniel got out of the car, swaying slightly. The other driver, visibly dazed, also emerged from his vehicle. Fortunately, neither of them appeared to be seriously injured. "Are you all right?" Nathaniel asked, his mind still on Mayor Lewis. The other man nodded, rubbing his head. "Yes, I think so. And you?" "I'm fine," Nathaniel replied, though the urgency of the situation did not allow him to think clearly. "I have to get to the hospital. It's an emergency." The man looked at the damaged cars, then at Nathaniel. "I'm a doctor too. If you need a ride, I can take you." Nathaniel hesitated for a moment, but the need to get to the hospital was too great. "Yes, please," he accepted. They both got into the other doctor's car, and within minutes they were on their way to Virgen del Rocío. Nathaniel could barely contain his anxiety. Every second counted, and he knew that Mayor Lewis's life was hanging by a thread. Finally, they arrived at the hospital. Nathaniel jumped out of the car and ran towards the emergency entrance. Anna was waiting for him, her face reflecting the gravity of the situation. "He's in the operating room. His vital signs are unstable," Anna informed him as she led him down the hallway. Nathaniel nodded, mentally preparing himself for what lay ahead. He entered the room and saw Mayor Lewis lying on the operating table, his face pale and sweaty. The medical team was already at work, but the situation seemed critical. "We need to stabilize him to take him to surgery," Nathaniel said in a firm voice, taking control of the situation. He began giving precise orders to the team, each movement calculated and sure. Time seemed to stretch as they fought to save the mayor's life. Nathaniel knew that every second was vital. The pressure was immense, but he could not afford to make any mistakes. The tension in the operating room was palpable. The steady beep of the heart monitor and the murmurs of the doctors and nurses filled the space as Nathaniel Walker worked with meticulous precision. Every second was crucial, and Mayor Lewis's life depended on his skill and determination. Despite the tireless efforts of Nathaniel and his team, the mayor's condition worsened. The weight on Nathaniel's shoulders was immense. He knew that the entire hospital, possibly the whole city, was waiting for news of his success. But as the minutes passed, hope began to dwindle. "More epinephrine now," Nathaniel ordered in a firm voice without taking his eyes off the patient. Nurse Anna moved quickly to carry out his instruction, but the heart monitor continued to show signs of imminent failure. A deathly silence fell over the room as the monitor emitted a long, continuous beep. Nathaniel, with a mixture of exhaustion and despair, looked at his team. He knew what that meant. "Stop resuscitation," he finally said, his voice barely audible. Those present looked at each other with expressions of disbelief and sadness. Mayor Lewis, an important figure in the city, had passed away. Nathaniel slowly stepped away from the table, letting the others take care of the body. Defeat weighed on him like a granite slab. In the hospital lobby, the news of the mayor's death spread rapidly. The atmosphere was charged with shock and consternation. The media, alerted to the gravity of the situation, began to arrive, their cameras and microphones ready to capture every detail. Nathaniel headed for the break room, needing a moment to process what had happened. As he washed his hands, he caught his reflection in the mirror. The image staring back at him was that of an exhausted and dejected man. He knew he had done everything he could, but the reality of death was a heavy burden to bear. It wasn't long before the mayor's family arrived at the hospital. His widow, Mrs. Lewis, entered the building with an expression of grief and determination. Upon seeing Nathaniel, she approached him, her eyes filled with tears and contained fury. "How could you let this happen?" she asked in a trembling voice filled with accusation. "My husband trusted you. How could you fail him like this?" Nathaniel, feeling the weight of her pain, tried to answer calmly. "We did everything we could, Mrs. Lewis. Unfortunately, his condition was very serious when he arrived." "That's not enough," she retorted, her voice rising. "He needed to live. You were supposed to save him." The confrontation drew the attention of everyone in the lobby. The press began to record, capturing the moment of pain and conflict. Mrs. Lewis's words echoed in the air, filled with despair and rage. In the days that followed, criticism of Nathaniel intensified. The mayor's family publicly accused him of negligence, and the media wasted no time in following the narrative. Articles and reports questioned his ability and judgment, making him the target of public fury. "Dr. Walker, What do you have to say about the allegations of negligence? Why couldn't you save the mayor? Was it an error in judgment or incompetence? The journalist's questions hounded him at every turn. In the hospital, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Some colleagues supported him in silence, understanding the difficulty of his situation, but others began to distance themselves, fearing the repercussions. The Virgen del Rocío Hospital, normally a haven of calm and efficiency, had become a cauldron of tension and whispers. Nathaniel Walker, with the shadow of accusation hanging over him, walked the halls with his head held high, but the weight of the stares and murmurs was not lost on him. He knew the situation was delicate, and his career, his calling, was at stake. One afternoon, Nathaniel met with his lawyer, Dr. Harrison, in a hospital conference room. The white walls and sterile environment contrasted sharply with the gravity of the situation. "We have a lot of work ahead of us, Nathaniel," said Harrison, placing a thick folder on the table. "We need to gather all the evidence we can to prove there was no negligence on your part." Nathaniel nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. "I'll do whatever it takes. I can't let this injustice continue." As they worked together, reviewing documents and preparing their strategy, the atmosphere in the hospital remained tense. Some colleagues avoided Nathaniel, afraid of being implicated. Others, like Nurse Anna, remained steadfast in their support. A few days later, during one of the preparatory sessions with Harrison, Nathaniel received devastating news. Dr. Smith, a colleague and friend of many years, had decided to testify against him. Smith, pressured by Edward, the hospital director, had agreed to give testimony blaming Nathaniel for the death of Mayor Lewis. "This is a betrayal," Nathaniel said, clenching his fists. "I can't believe Smith would do this." Harrison, although surprised, remained calm. "We must keep a cool head. This situation is delicate, but we can counter it. We need to find inconsistencies in his testimony." On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed with journalists, colleagues, and curious onlookers. The atmosphere was oppressive, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Nathaniel sat next to Harrison, preparing to face what was to come. Dr. Smith's testimony was a hard blow. In a steady voice, he described how, according to him, Nathaniel had made incorrect decisions that led to the mayor's death. Every word was like a stab wound, and Nathaniel felt the courtroom turning against him. "Dr. Walker acted recklessly," Smith said, avoiding his gaze. "He didn't follow proper protocols, and that led to tragedy." Nathaniel, his heart heavy, listened in silence. He knew that any interruption could jeopardize his case. When it was Harrison's turn to cross-examine Smith, the lawyer stood up with an expression of determination. "Dr. Smith, can you explain why your version of events has changed since your initial statement?" he asked, pointing out a discrepancy in the documents. Smith, visibly uncomfortable, hesitated. "Well, after further reflection, I realized there were details I had overlooked. Details that conveniently coincide with the needs of the prosecution," Harrison retorted, his tone sharp. The tension in the courtroom mounted as Harrison unraveled the inconsistencies in Smith's testimony. The defense was beginning to gain ground, but the battle was far from over. The first session of the trial ended without a clear verdict. The judge, recognizing the complexity of the case, decided to postpone the decision to a later date. Nathaniel left the courthouse with deep concern. He walked towards his car with slow, heavy steps, each one echoing in his mind as a reminder of the gravity of the situation. Upon arriving home, he found Claire waiting for him in the living room, her face reflecting the same concern he felt. "How did it go?" she asked, though the answer was evident in Nathaniel's expression. Nathaniel sighed, sinking onto the sofa. It didn't go well, Claire. Smith testified against me. I can't believe he betrayed me like that. Claire sat next to him, her hand on his in a gesture of support. Nathaniel, this is just the beginning. We have to be strong. The pressure of the accusations and the trial began to take its toll beyond the professional sphere. Claire, seeing how the stress and tension were consuming Nathaniel, made a painful but necessary decision. One night, after putting the children to bed, she sat down with Nathaniel in the kitchen. Nathaniel, she began, her voice trembling, I've been thinking about this a lot. I think it would be better for the children and me if we went away for a while. Nathaniel looked up, surprised and hurt by her words. What are you saying, Claire? Are you leaving me? That's not it, she replied, trying to remain calm. I just want to protect the children from all this stress and danger. We need a stable environment, and right now we can't have that here. The blow was devastating. Nathaniel, already overwhelmed by the accusations and the trial, now faced the prospect of losing his family, even if temporarily. Claire, please don't do this. I need you here with the kids. Together we can get through this. Claire shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I love you, Nathaniel, but I have to think about what's best for our children. This is only temporary. When this is all over, we'll come back. The farewell was bitter. Claire packed some essentials and, with the children in the car, left for her parents' house in another city. Nathaniel watched them drive away, feeling like a part of his life was crumbling. The loneliness and silence in the house were crushing. Nathaniel was in a state of grief and confusion, but he knew he couldn't afford the luxury of surrendering. He had to stay strong, not only for his career and his reputation, but also for his family. He immersed himself in his work and preparing for the next session of the trial. He spent endless hours reviewing documents, interviewing witnesses, and working with his lawyer, Dr. Harrison. The support of his team, though valuable, could not replace the void left by the absence of his family. One day, while reviewing files in his office, he received an unexpected visit. Anna, the nurse who had been by his side throughout the entire process, entered with an expression of urgency. Nathaniel, I heard something that might help you, she said, closing the door behind her. Nathaniel looked up, intrigued. What did you hear? Anna approached, lowering her voice. I overheard Edward talking to Smith. They were arguing about the testimony and how he should change it to hurt you. Nathaniel's heart pounded. Are you sure? Yes, Anna affirmed. I could testify about what I heard. This could prove that Smith was manipulated. Hope flickered in Nathaniel's heart. Thank you, Anna. This could change everything. With this new information, Nathaniel and Harrison adjusted their strategy. They knew that Anna's statement could be crucial to exposing the truth. They spent several nights going over every detail, preparing questions, and anticipating possible responses from the other side. Finally, the day of the second session of the trial arrived. The courtroom was packed again, with journalists, colleagues, and curious onlookers attentive to every move. Nathaniel, dressed in his best suit, felt more confident, but still nervous. The tension in the air was palpable. The judge called for order, and Harrison rose to present his new witness. I call Miss Anna Carter to the stand, he announced in a firm voice. Anna, with a determined expression on her face, walked towards the stand and took her seat. After being sworn in, Harrison began his questioning. Miss Carter, could you please tell the court what you overheard during your shift at the Virgen del Rocío Hospital? Harrison asked, approaching the stand. Yes, of course, Anna replied in a clear voice. I was in the break room when I overheard Dr. Edward talking to Dr. Smith. They were discussing how to modify Smith's testimony to blame Dr. Walker for the mayor's death. The judge raised an eyebrow and asked for silence in the courtroom, which had erupted in murmurs of surprise. Harrison continued. Can you confirm that Dr. Edward instructed Dr. Smith to give false testimony? He asked. Yes, Anna stated confidently. Edward told Smith that they needed to blame someone and that Nathaniel was the perfect scapegoat. The courtroom buzzed with whispers once again. The judge banged his gavel to restore order. Silence in the court, he commanded. Harrison turned to the judge. Your Honor, I request that this new evidence be admitted and that Dr. Smith's testimony be reviewed. The judge nodded. The request is granted. Let's proceed. Anna's testimony changed the tone of the trial. Smith's credibility was called into question, and Nathaniel's defense began to gain momentum. Edward, sitting on the other side of the room, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. During the recess, Harrison and Nathaniel met in a private room. You did a good job, Harrison said, but we still have to stay alert. Edward and his team won't give up so easily. Nathaniel nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and weariness. I know, but at least now we have a chance. The afternoon went by with a series of testimonies and cross-examinations. Every word was crucial, and Nathaniel's defense continued to unravel the truth. The next day, the court reconvened. Harrison presented the final piece of evidence, an audio recording provided by a hospital employee who had overheard and recorded the conversation between Edward and Smith. The judge listened to the recording in silence, his face impassive. When it was over, he looked at Edward with a stern expression. Dr. Edward, this court does not tolerate the manipulation of witnesses or corruption. Your actions will be thoroughly investigated. The judge's statement was a devastating blow to Edward. The courtroom watched with a mixture of surprise and relief. Nathaniel felt that justice was finally prevailing. Harrison, satisfied with the turn of events, turned to Nathaniel. We did it. The truth is coming to light. Nathaniel, his eyes filled with gratitude, nodded. Thank you, Harrison. I couldn't have done it without your help. The final session of the trial was a triumph for Nathaniel. The judge, after reviewing all the evidence and testimonies, found Nathaniel Walker not guilty of negligence. His name was cleared and his reputation restored. The relief in the courtroom was palpable. Colleagues and friends approached Nathaniel to congratulate him. He finally felt like a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. That night, upon returning home, Nathaniel found a message from Claire on the answering machine. Nathaniel, we're so proud of you. The kids and I can't wait to come home. We love you. Nathaniel smiled, tears in his eyes, and allowed himself a moment of pure happiness. The battle had been hard, but he had finally managed to clear his name and protect his dignity. The morning sun streamed through the curtains, filling the room with a warm and comforting light. Nathaniel Walker woke up feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. The storm that had ravaged his life had subsided, leaving a clear, bright sky of new beginnings. The sound of the doorbell interrupted his thoughts. He got up quickly, his heart racing with anticipation. As he opened the door, he saw Claire and their children with beaming smiles and eyes full of joy. "Dad!" the children shouted in unison, running towards him and hugging him tightly. Nathaniel lifted them up, feeling a wave of emotion wash over him. "I've missed you so much," he said, his voice cracking. Claire, with a smile full of love and pride, approached and hugged him too. "We're back, Nathaniel. We knew you could do it." The house was filled with laughter and conversation as the family reunited. Claire prepared a special breakfast to celebrate their return, and they all sat down at the table, enjoying each other's company and the simple pleasure of being together again. Nathaniel looked at his family, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me and for waiting," he said, taking Claire's hand. "We always believed in you, Nathaniel. We knew the truth would prevail," Claire replied, squeezing his hand affectionately. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Nathaniel returned to the Virgen del Rocío hospital, where he was met with applause and words of congratulations. Although some colleagues still had reservations, most recognized his courage and dedication. Edward, the hospital director, had been suspended pending further investigation. Nathaniel was reinstated to his position with full honors, and the hospital administration began implementing reforms to ensure that corruption and manipulation would never happen again. On his first day back, Nathaniel ran into Anna Carter in the hallway. "Anna, I don't know how to thank you enough," he said sincerely. "I only did what was right, Nathaniel," Anna replied with a smile. "I'm glad to see that everything is back in its place." Nathaniel nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. "Let's move forward and make sure this place is the best it can be." Family life flourished as well. Nathaniel and Claire worked together to rebuild their home, dedicating quality time to their children and each other. Weekends were filled with outdoor activities, trips to the park and family dinners. The laughter and joy they shared were a testament to the strength and love that had kept them united during the darkest of times. Nathaniel Walker's return to normalcy was not immediate. Despite the joy of having his family back and being reinstated to his position at the Virgen del Rocío hospital, the scars of the trial and betrayal were still fresh. But time, perseverance, and the love of his family began to heal those wounds. The news of his exoneration and return to the hospital spread quickly throughout the community. The media that had previously accused him mercilessly now wrote articles about his bravery and determination. Social media was flooded with messages of support, and for the first time in a long time, Nathaniel felt the weight of public opinion shift in his favor. One day, as he was walking through the park with Claire and the children, an elderly woman approached him. "Dr. Walker, I want to thank you for all you've done," she said with a warm smile. "My grandson was in your care last year, and I know you are a man of principle. I always believed in you." Nathaniel, touched, shook her hand. "Thank you, Ma'am. Your words mean a lot to me." The growing wave of public support not only encouraged him personally, but also had a positive impact on his work. The hospital administration, aware of the renewed respect for Nathaniel, began to consider his proposals for reform more seriously. Meetings with the management team became more productive, and gradually the atmosphere in the hospital began to improve. However, not everyone was convinced. Despite the widespread support, there were still those who doubted his innocence and questioned his abilities. A group of doctors, led by Dr. Garcia, remained skeptical. At a staff meeting, Garcia couldn't contain his opinion. "Nathaniel, although you have been exonerated, some of us still have questions about your judgment and the way you handled the situation," he said, his tone laden with distrust. Nathaniel stood his ground, looking at his colleague calmly. "I understand your concerns, Garcia, but everything I did was always in the best interest of my patients. I am willing to discuss any doubts you may have, but I ask that you also consider the facts and not just speculation." The room fell silent for a moment before other colleagues began to express their support for Nathaniel. "We all make mistakes, but the important thing is to learn from them," added Anna Carter, reaffirming her loyalty to Nathaniel. As the weeks passed, the reforms Nathaniel had proposed began to take shape. The hospital introduced new policies of transparency and accountability, ensuring that any allegation of malpractice was handled with the utmost seriousness and fairness. In addition, continuing education programs for medical staff were implemented with the aim of further improving the quality of patient care. The community also benefited from these changes. Patients and their families began to notice a difference in the hospital's treatment and efficiency. Satisfaction surveys showed a marked improvement, and the Virgen del Rocío Hospital began to regain its reputation as one of the best medical institutions in the region. One afternoon, Nathaniel was invited to speak at a medical conference on ethics and reform in medicine. Standing in front of an audience of healthcare professionals, he shared his experience and the lessons he had learned. "Integrity and justice are fundamental pillars of our profession," he said, looking out at the attentive faces. "I have learned that it is not enough to be a good doctor. We must also be advocates for our patients and for a just and equitable healthcare system. The challenges I faced taught me the importance of transparency and accountability." His words resonated with the audience, and at the end of his speech, he received a standing ovation. Nathaniel knew that there was still much to be done, but moments like that reminded him of why he had chosen this career and gave him the strength to keep going. Back at the hospital, he continued to work tirelessly, driven by the support of the community and the commitment to his principles. Meetings with the management team became more frequent and productive, and every small step forward was a step towards a better future for the hospital. One evening, as he and Claire were preparing dinner together, she looked at him with pride. "You've done an incredible job, Nathaniel. I'm so proud of you." Nathaniel smiled, taking Claire's hand. "I couldn't have done it without you and the kids. You are my greatest motivation." Claire smiled back, knowing that despite the challenges, they were stronger and more united than ever. The battle had been hard, but together they had emerged victorious. As the months passed, Nathaniel Walker's figure was consolidated as a benchmark in the fight for justice and ethics in medicine. His story inspired other health professionals to not give up in the face of adversity and to always fight for what is right. The Virgen del Rocío Hospital, under his leadership, flourished and became a role model for other institutions. The changes implemented not only improved the quality of care, but also created a fairer and more transparent work environment for all. Nathaniel knew that the fight for a better and fairer health system would never end, but he was willing to face any challenge that came his way. With his family by his side and the support of the community, he was stronger than ever and ready to continue making a difference one day at a time. Nathaniel Walker's story is an emotional and dramatic journey that captures the essence of the fight for justice and integrity in the face of adversity. From the beginning, Nathaniel is presented as a committed and passionate doctor, willing to challenge norms to save lives. His decision to help a child without health insurance, despite restrictive hospital policies, shows his courage and dedication to his vocation. Nathaniel's life is shaken by betrayal, injustice, and public pressure. The accusation of medical negligence and the subsequent trial threaten not only his career, but also his emotional and family stability. The temporary departure of his wife and children adds a layer of vulnerability and pain, highlighting the human dimension of the character. However, it is in these moments of darkness that Nathaniel demonstrates his true strength. His ability to stand firm in his principles, even when everything seems to be against him, is inspiring. The collaboration with his lawyer and the unconditional support of colleagues like Anna Carter underscore the importance of solidarity and truth. The culmination of the story, with Nathaniel's exoneration and his triumphant return to the hospital, offers a powerful lesson on resilience and integrity. The reforms he promotes at the Virgen del Rocío Hospital, as well as his continued commitment to medical ethics, reflect a deep commitment to justice and equity. In short, Nathaniel Walker's story reminds us that true strength lies in the ability to fight for what is right, regardless of the difficulties. His journey is a testament to the importance of integrity and justice, and a call to all of us to never give up in the face of adversity. If you found the characters' journeys inspiring, give us a like and comment to share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more uplifting stories highlighting the power of human connection and kindness. Thanks for watching.